So my question actually is not fully related, but it's on the question of principle. Um, I started reading, but I haven't fully read the article that Leonard Peikoff wrote about why you need principles. I don't know if it's familiar to you, but at one point he writes that something like, whatever choice you make, you're always acting on a principle. So for example, he gave the example of free trade, and like you're either acting on the free trade principle or you're not. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So in every choice I make, there are some fundamental principles. So if I'm like in a given moment, for example, if I uh like going back to this simple example of like I check my phone on impulse because I'm like frustrated and I'm not making progress with work, then or my thinking or whatever, then I am acting on the principle of impulse. Is that what's being said?
Mm, well, when he says that either you're acting on the trader principle or you're not, that seems obvious. He must mean something by saying that, because obviously either are or you aren't, because that covers literally every action possible.
Right.
Any, so I don't know. I need context more to that.
Okay, that's okay. You know what? I will go because I haven't fully gone through that essay as well. I will go through it. I will cut the relevant sections and then I can try bring in examples like the simplified examples. It will be better to do it that way. So that's fine. Okay.
I thought it would have gone a different way to argue that, so I'm not sure.
Um, okay, let's. All right, so now we're talking about independence as a virtue. Okay, independent man does not function through others. He's not concerned with them in any primary matter, not in his aim, his motive, not in his thinking, not in his desires, not in the source of his energy. So this bit about he may love another and even decide that he does not care to live without his beloved, but he chooses his love as a complement to his work, and he chooses his own rational standards for the sake of his own happiness. So I'm just confused with this. Like you can decide you don't want to live without someone, but that like love can't be more important than your work. It doesn't. I'm just confused by that. Like I
Um,
know, I'm trying to take it literally and understand it. Like I get you can love someone a lot, but it's just confusing to me to say. I'm just confused by this. Like it seems like you're saying you can't love someone more than your work, but then
um,
do you have any thoughts on that?
trying to interpret this. He needs others. Yeah, I mean, some of it seems he's saying don't put others above yourself, but I'm not. His chooses his love as a complement to his work. In some level, he seems to be saying, well, I don't know if work he means even like things you do to make some money, but don't ideally want. So I'm interpreting work here as in what you do as a career, what you do, what your productive work is, like what you produce, what you desire to produce. That's how I'm understanding this. So in that sense, you wouldn't even put the love of another above that because it should be integrated with your life. It seems
Right.
to me that's what Peacock is saying, that they should be integrated with your life. A person isn't just above it. You don't have the things you do for yourself and then the person is above you, or that you desire or love them for reasons apart from your life or your work or your own happiness. Like you love them for their sake, not for yours. And that's what he seems to be talking about as independence. That is, you're not taking them as your standard. You're not living for them. Rather, they live with you in a sense. Like
Okay.
they enhance your life, and that's how I understand this passage.
Right. And so that's what primary means. But
Yeah, like
I'm
you're the motivating force. You're the reason for these actions.
yeah. Um, I'm still not full. I don't know. I'm still not really clear on that. But even thinking like, I'm not sure if I'm just not understanding primary matter or something yet. But like, if you're willing, if you love someone so much that you wouldn't live without them, and it said you decide you not care to live without your beloved, And
That
that seems primary to me. Like that seems
I
like it's
know.
fundamental.
I don't like
Uh,
that wording either. I would disagree with Pico. They're like, why would you phrase it that way? Like you don't care to live without them. It seems I've always felt weird about those kind of statements. I've seen things like that before, like even Rand maybe phrase it that way, but
right,
I mean, I would rather just phrase it as it doesn't seem to contradict their point, but I think the connotation might be better this way that you're not concerned with others as a primary concern. It's not like your number one concern. It's not either you don't care. You do care. If they matter, you have to look at it. They're not irrelevant. You other people might be a concern, but
right.
the number one concern should be you. It's that you're the one living the life, and at least it's just claiming here that you should live for your happiness, your rational standards, and your values in your work, and even with other people. But you don't love other people for their sake, and you want to live life with your values. You'd rather live life with those values, and living life without those values is a detriment or less flourishing or an otherwise inferior life to that degree that that value is missing. So you would want to keep it in your life and things like that, but you're not saying I love them for their sake or I love them because they are the most important the primary of judging an ethical action. Like another person is like the standard of judgment. That's how he's trying to. That's how I'm interpreting this. Like other people are not your standard of judging what's right or wrong. Rather, yourself should be. And they're to the extent that they enhance and improve your life. Yes, you should absolutely take care of them or be concerned with them. And if they are values, yes, you would rather have them in your life than not.
Yep.
So logically, I mean, that would seem to entail that, yeah, it's not that you may decide even you value something deeply, but it shouldn't mean that you betray your other values or toss them away or say that all values are inferior to this person. Like a more balanced perspective might be like, I have my standards, I have my happiness. They're part of that. I want them to be part of that. That would be the more um, rational way to think of it, I think.
Maybe the example, even from, I'm just been thinking as well, the example from the Fountainhead is when, what's her name? Dagny? Yeah, I think it's Dagny. Is it Dagny?
Dominique and
Dominic.
Fountainhead.
Dominic. Yeah, I get confused
Yeah.
because I'm reading one of them again, reading Alice right. Um, when Dominique decides she wants to leave Rock and he lets her, even though she said she could be his, whatever he wanted her to do, she could do. And like, so if he wanted her to just stay with him, she would, but he let her. And so that's in a way putting his own judgment above. Um, Actually, I don't know. I need to think about that one more. The other thing I was thinking about was, you don't often hear, like you hear of people being um, really upset and lost losing a loved one, but you don't often hear of people like feeling tragic or existentially depressed after losing, a job they love or having that cut off. Like, when Rock is working in the quarry, he's not like depressed. Um, but if you lose someone you love, it seems like you do more often. So I don't know if that says anything about, if there's anything to read into that as far as this goes, but
That's an
um,
interesting question. I mean, I would doubt that work did not feel any depression. And if Rand didn't, that's probably kind of. I don't recall him having any particular feeling. Like, I think that
yeah,
was
me
almost.
neither.
He was weirdly stoic about it. I
Yeah,
think most people would be, and would sensibly be upset. You're not gonna obviously stop living, and you'll keep trying. But I think anybody should recognize that it hurts. Losing a value infected your life. It's a negative impact, and yeah, you should be affected by it. That would
right,
make sense. Or
right,
maybe it's just work wasn't showing it. Like he acknowledged it, but you move on. It's like it's too bad, but you move on. If he was sad for a couple of weeks, but not so sad that nothing mattered and he slept in his bed all day. It's like it sucks. He probably said that, like moped around for a couple of days, but still
Yeah.
got on with his life. That's usually how I would understand somebody like that. Or Rourke didn't seem somebody that doesn't care, so I wouldn't even interpret that Rand failed to show his emotions. Just he doesn't show it on his sleeve, but he cares about things. He does. So
Yeah, I need to reread it as well. I'd like to. I often miss stuff in the. Um, okay. See, I mean, it's not that you can go through this, but it's not necessarily that easy to then go, okay, how do I implement this?
primary matter. Yeah, I mean, the difficulty is what does it mean to put your standard, put yourself, not yourself, but um, life as a standard. So how do you interpret that for your life? How
Right.
does that apply to your life? When
Right.
your life isn't the standard as much as life is the standard, then you apply that to your life. And you can say, how do I seek my happiness with this? Or how is that achievable when I implement this? Um, I guess that's
What
the point of the virtues in a way, that being independent is part of this. Just think for yourself, and that's should be the kind of behavior or the way to get at that.
what do you mean by your life isn't the standard so much as life is the standard? I didn't quite
Um,
follow it.
so if you, I've had disagreements about this, so you'll find some disagreement probably in this phrasing, but I say that life is a standard because you're using man in general as a standard, the things that are applicable to all people. Like we all use reason, so to the extent that we all use reason, or to the extent that we have reason, which is, well, I don't want to say the extent. So we should all use our reason for the same ends and purpose. That doesn't vary between you and me. But the particular questions about your happiness might have to be applied to context. Say whether or not is it rational to say enjoy listening to Beethoven. Rand hated Beethoven, I think, but I think Peikoff liked him a lot. So I mean, you might say that you could argue that maybe it was Rand shouldn't listen to him, but maybe Peikoff should. Well, maybe that's not a good example, but so even health examples that yeah, you want to eat well and eating healthy, but you can't just create the diet for all people. Like there's a general principle that you need a certain amount of calories and nutrients and whatnot, but you can't create the diet. Like say what's automatically in each instance what people should eat because there's allergies, sensitivities,
Right.
or even genetic aspects that
Right.
is not particular. It's very particular to you, and you're not saying that's the standard is just yourself. The
Yes.
standard should be something more generalizable
I
and more
understand.
universal, even.
So the fundamentals of human nature are taken into account and then applied to your specific situation. So it sets the frame or the context, like, okay, I need to work, not steal, as an example. And then that's it. But then the specifics are like, what should I eat? What is healthy for me? What is healthy for me? Well, I have an allergy, I have fructose intolerance. Okay, I can't eat this and that. So it's you're saying the life is the standard just means there's a broader framework to look at it, and then uh,
Yeah,
the specifics then determine some of your choices. That's sort of what you're getting.
yeah,
Okay. It's just a wording thing, right?
yeah. I'm emphasizing that the standard isn't that it's not you because that'd be kind of subjective. Because yes,
Right.
people are different in some way. It's not like that's the standard. Then you're saying the standard is unique to everyone. Well, I'm trying to say there's a standard that applies to everyone that is rational, which is all humans. We all use
Yeah.
rationality. That's all essential.
Yeah, I agree with that. It probably comes down to, if you've had that discussion, it probably comes down to the meaning
Yes.
that people have when they say your life is the standard versus life is the standard,
Yeah.
because they might be referring to the same thing or different things. But the
Yeah.
thing I just thought of as well is that, I could have certain ways of thinking and operating that are not healthy or conducive to good living. And if I said my life is the standard, then I'm not sure, like, what if I'm not thinking properly? I need to rework my thinking
Right.
using methods that are proper to a being, a human in general, and man's nature in general. So something like that.
Yes.
But yeah, I guess it comes down to the meaning. Okay, let's have a look at this. This is interesting. I was trying to draw out implications of this. So the opposite policy, meaning the opposite policy of the independent man concerned not with people in any primary matter, is one that accepts as one guide a different primary, people. This type of person is not moved by concern for logic or truth. He is oriented basically not to reality, but to other men. What they feel, what he can wheedle out of them or pump, what he can do to them, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
The man who acquires his belief by accepting the consensus of significant others from prestige, reputation in the mind of others. Okay, I'm not fully sure if this is applicable, but I'm wondering if there is some, let's say someone selects their job by primarily the amount of money that it can provide them with, like,
Yes.
and some other things, but let's say primarily money. Money is set by the market. It's not set by your interests. And so I wonder if there's an element of adopting this policy of dependence then in that case. Like, it's funny because you're still taking into account your interests, but as in, maybe your interest is earning money, let's say. There's still some element of selfishness involved, but I wonder if it's not a fully fleshed out connection, but I wonder if you do decide your line of work by the expected amount of money you can earn, is there some form of dependence there? Because where is your interest in, like, what is your, but I don't know if interest is ever really devoid of things like money, but money is set by a market, money is set by other people. You can be incredibly intelligent and earn okay money, or you can have someone who's not that intelligent earning insane amounts of money just because it's a more popular in demand field. And so, yeah, anyway, your thoughts on someone selecting, do you reckon there's some connection to dependence there?
Selecting a
A
job
job
because of
on
money,
the basis of money. Yeah.
it would seem, yes, I would say it's very person dependent. I mean, as the reason,
As
I
one of
guess it
the more
depends.
important reasons, because aren't you then waiting? If you select by money, you're selecting by market, meaning
Yeah,
earnings are determined by supply and demand. Demand is other people's
I
values.
think it would be at some point, some way, other dependent because it's not really trying to see the value in these actions and what it functions for your life except the mere monetary value. It's hard to
It's
say.
confusing because it's monetary. Like, you have the expectation that, I've definitely been swept into this. You have the expectation that the money will buy you something, but it feels like there's a difference there between someone who's motivated by that and someone who's motivated by, I really want to see buildings go up in the world and my buildings and my designs. And I don't care if I'm not going to earn that much. I just want to see these buildings go up. That's what I love. There's a difference between that or a painter who works a job on the side and is like, I love painting. Like, this is what I want to pursue, makes me feel good. There's someone who's like, oh, this is like, I can buy heaps of money and have a night. Like, if I work in investment banking, I can have a nice house and whatever else. Like, there's something different there. And I'm wondering if there is dependence in that case, second-handedness.
That's really hard to say.
But it's
That's a
disconnected.
good question.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, the harder thing here is that it's more abstract. It's not in the form of like kidding, seeing someone and trying to please them. It's more
Right.
like, here is a market, which is an abstraction, setting demand for some product by its own values, which may not be yours. And then you're like, okay, you're taking that abstract signal of price as your cue to, work in some field. So yeah.
I'm not sure. It I think it really depends on the particular job. Because in a way, when you're investing or giving money or to make more money, in a way you are, I mean, you're providing a value, an actual thing in the world that is of value, not merely because somebody said it was, but you're providing a value in the sense of like you're meeting a need, you're meeting a want for a person, you're creatively thinking of how to provide that and even, I don't know, enhance the economic market, you could say.
Sure. Wasn't
And I think
Winan
in
doing
that,
that?
yeah, I think to a large extent it is fine. I guess it depends on what do you understand why you're doing it. Are you merely thinking of I want a really big house and that's all I care about? That would be different than like I'm concerned about making a really good product and that the product gives me pride. It gives me motive and it like it's because wine and part of it was like status, right? Wasn't I don't quite remember.
So Winan wanted power over others because he thought that was the
Yeah.
only way he could, he didn't like people. And this is my understanding because I haven't read it in a while. Neither did I do much in-depth analysis when I did. But yeah, he wanted power over others. And the only way he saw to get power was through running a newspaper. And so he applied his genius to that. And yeah, he made heaps of money, but he's shown as a second-hander. And now that I think about it, like, so in a way, he wanted money could get him power. And some people see money as power or wealth or like a nice house. But there's a difference there between I'm not clear on it fully, and this is why I wanted to bring it up. But there does seem to be a difference between someone who goes into a job because of the money it can provide them versus someone who approaches work in like, what can I turn the world into? Or what can I,
Yeah, in that sense, money could be, like Rand would say, it's a sign, symbol of like your value that you bring to the world. And if you approach it that way, then I think it would be perfectly fine to even seek a job because of its money,
even
because
if
you're
you're whining.
recognized. But not if you're whining, because his motive and way of thinking is what makes it wrong. It's not the action I'm judging here, but his attitude that he was already approaching it from. I'm going to sacrifice others. At least in his mind, he wasn't thinking about the value he's providing or creating value or his pride. He was thinking more about manipulating or affecting people, which
I,
is kind of, that's the bigger issue about Winand.
I'd got the impression that he figured that he would just feed them what, like his whole idea was giving them what they want. So I remember he put up like a test advert with an upcoming scientist raising money for this up and coming bright scientist versus some lady who murdered someone else or some kind of sorry story. And everyone gave money for the sorry story. And he was just like, yep, that's what we're going to run with. And his approach was to, rather than, he was actually providing what he saw as value. He just hated the people that bought from him. And in a way, like, but it's tricky because obviously, like, you can have someone who's working for money so they can raise a child, and in that case, you can't say that, right? Because the value they're pursuing is their child. Um, but there is
It's
still a difference between that and someone who's like, I think of Rourke or someone who's pursuing something they're fascinated in apart from the money. I'm not sure.
um I mean, yeah, Rourke isn't as concerned about the money. I'm just thinking that even being an investor itself can be appealing just for the amount of money, but there's reasons you could seek that out. Like I know I want to make a lot of money eventually in my life, just a huge amount, but not everybody's able to. But if I did, I would invest it to greater things. And the money itself is it's not the having the money so much as what it means to have them to have
I
earned the
agree.
money and then spend more
Yeah, I
of it. And
agree.
I think and that's perfectly fine. Even if Rourke didn't do that approach well, he's not an investor. I mean, investors are almost always looking for the most amount of money,
Right.
but
But
it's not. It's hard though if we start to talk about products that are in some way deeply irrational. Like if you're selling a newspaper based on slandering people and or even legally slandering people and as a tabloid, like yeah, people want it, but should you provide a value like that? Should you provide a
well,
value like sure you can get away with it, but is it appropriate to even want to create such a value? That's where it gets really tricky.
I don't think, yeah, I mean, I don't think the issue, maybe that's part of the issue, but I don't think the issue is products that are irrational because then
Okay.
you wouldn't have Keating. because
Right.
you can't say architecture is a deeply irrational product, and yet he was a second-hander, right? He was not independent. Um, and so if you approach, I think there would be a difference between someone who approached investing, let's say, as a kind of a game where they could test their intelligence and identify opportunities, manage risk, constantly better themselves, and see that as a joy itself, as someone who was like approaching it in terms of purely it's really tricky to say purely the monetary outcome, because if it is purely money money is a symbol of what the market demands, and that's not necessarily bad in and of itself. But if your interests are set by purely what others demand, that might be second-handed. Whereas, obviously you can have an ambition to make lots of money, and that's fine. But there's a difference if you make it as Rourke, who was happy not making anything, but turned out because he wanted to build the best buildings, and turns out other people recognized his talent, and then he made a ton of money, versus someone who just approached it purely from the perspective of making a lot of money. Because there's no consultation almost to their own. It's just purely consulting the market demands. Like, if you wanted to make a lot of money, okay, maybe you could start selling, I don't know, uh, silk underwear. And there's a huge market for that. And now suddenly your line of work is set by market interest and not by your own values. But it's still set by your own values, which is money. But I don't know. I can't quite get it yet. But do you get what I'm sort of trying to get at?
Yeah, I do. Like, because the market's deciding this thing, and you're deciding on a thing that the market, based on what the market's decided. In other
Yeah.
words, what other people have decided.
Right.
I see the difficulty. Um, I mean, in a way, you're asking, isn't it other oriented to think about what they want and giving them what they want
Yes.
rather than that's let me think about this. What did they
Well, and you made me think of Reid Hoffman. I think it was involved in Facebook, or LinkedIn. He wrote about viewing work through the lens of market realities. So what they want, aspirations, what are your interests and what are your skills, and then trying to find an intersection. So and it's complicated because it involves multiple aspects. Like, you can still involve your interests. There's a sense of compromise. Um, like, I think Rourke is an exception in that he's willing to pursue something where there's no money, but he thinks he's got a vision for something that people will like. There's some products like that, but most are not.
mm-hmm.
Some people invent things. They're like, there's no market for this now, but we're going to invent this because this appeals to the best. We think what is the best in people, and then it's a success. But a lot of markets are just set by people pursuing something that's already a proven product because other people like it. No, I don't know if it's necessarily because it's their interest. Like the selling
Yeah.
silk underwear, for example.
Yeah, it's hard to really come up with an analysis of this. I can't say I've run into this particular question much at all. So I don't.
Yeah.
All I can. I'd want to give a better answer, but I'll just say it's a good question, and that is something we're thinking about. Like to what extent should the values of others have an impact on your decisions?
Yeah.
I've had issues with that, thinking myself about that. Like in any business context, like sometimes I don't think people know what they want, and I know that's the wrong attitude sometimes. And I don't think that's good business advice, but I think there's some value to that kind of idea that the public doesn't know what they want until you give it to them. Like, yeah, I think you could work in studying going by market value. And I think it could work to the extent that it's not a primary goal in your life. Like that job isn't the reason for your being or something like that. But I think it might be different if it's like this is your most important job ever. It's why you exist. Is like saying why are you an engineer at Tesla or something? Like do you really care about this or like I'm trying to say is that it also could depend on the importance of the job and whether you created the product. Could depend on things like that.
I didn't quite follow that. It depends on the importance of the and whether you create dependence. What depends on the importance of the job?
I think whether or not it is second-handed to just provide something merely because other people want it. I think it depends on. I do think it matters what the product is. I don't know if I could say anything better than that. It depends on the
Yeah.
product and what your role in creating that product was.
Okay.
But I don't have an answer. Just that's the sort of things I would think about to then decide is it right or wrong. It's more a question of application than it is like somebody's thought of this before and has an answer. I think you have the tools here to answer it, but I think you'll probably see it's a very difficult question, and probably people would probably disagree with you, and it'd be hard to find consensus because it's such a difficult question.
I will write about that for sure. It is
Yeah.
interesting because this is stuff that determines life decisions. So, at least in my case, it definitely does. So, it'd be interesting to see, okay, well, these principles change the way you think about a lot. So, self-sufficient ego, the individuals. By the way, do you know where ego came from? This is such tangent because I haven't looked it up. But ego versus
It's
consciousness, for example, is it Freud?
for consciousness, I think Freud was the first one to talk about it in
Ego,
psychology.
right?
But I know it's
Where?
the first person I am of a first person to be in Latin. Ego is
Oh,
I am.
okay,
Ego means I am.
right. Ergo, what is it? Cogito ergo sum.
No,
I think
ergo
they're
is therefore. Ego
ah
is I am. Cogito
ah
ergo sum. Sum is the third person of it, of to be.
okay,
So ego is first person.
okay, got it. And then when you've heard it in a psychological context, is there any difference between the concept and just saying consciousness?
I don't hear it used in psychology even. I might hear ego in terms of talking about Freud, but otherwise I do hear consciousness. I don't hear ego in like cognitive psychology. No one really says that.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
They will say consciousness.
Okay. Got it. So it's just one of those psycho terms or whatever, psychoanalytic things.
Yeah, I don't see it anywhere else besides like philosophy sometimes, or but nothing